We're going to do a reset of our lives today to help us in this new year and new decade. Over the years of my life, and I can remember when my dad introduced this particular service down at Grace Church when I was just a kid, probably 10, 11 years old is when I remember this service taking place. So it has been part of our worship practice for 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years of life. But due to the nature of this burning ceremony, this particular service has helped me clear my head and my heart, things that I was struggling with, things that I got overwhelmed with, that just my head kept touching and my heart kept holding on to that I needed to get cleared of. It helped resolve some inner conflicts in my life. It helped me seek forgiveness from God and let go of some of the mistakes that I have personally made in my walk with God. It also helped me let people off the hook who have wronged me. So it's been a powerful reset. It's been a great way to start the year for me and many in our church family over the years. And I'm praying that that is going to happen for you. But I am going to say this, that over the next few moments, you really listen with listening ears. You got to give this thing 100% of your attention and not allow tradition, religion, or anything else, any distraction to come in and get you off point. Because I believe there is a thus saith the Lord in this particular approach to starting this year off. It's in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. In the New Living Translation, it reads, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us." It's as though the writer here is saying, come on now. He's cheering us on from the distance, saying, come on. You have so much going for you, and so many people are standing and supporting, shouting and cheering you on. Now, just get rid of that thing that you're struggling with. That thing that keeps slowing you down. That thing that keeps tripping you up. So that you can run the race that God knows you can win. We need a reset. Because God has a race that we can win, and that is waiting to be run. While we were away this holiday, we were at our place in Georgia, and while we were there, Mary and the girls wanted to go and drive over to Atlanta to do some shopping. It's about a 2-hour drive to get there. Chris was on his way home to Miami to preach the message that he preached last week, which was a great message. And I say that not just because the kid's my son, but because it was a powerful message. After he got through story time with you, he started down into some real deep revelation. And it so touched me. Our friend over here, Nelson, sent me a text saying him and his wife were crying while they were listening to Chris. And I replied saying, man, so was I. I just couldn't believe what was coming out of his mind. There's his mouth that God had downloaded into his spirit and his mind. The kid doesn't even know the revelation that God is giving him at such a good young age. And it's a good thing he doesn't know, because his head is so big already. I don't know how he'd handle the rest of it. But the kid's got something on his life, and it's great to be able to see him stand in this place and share it. He really does. So he's heading home to come share with you and minister, and Mary and the girls are on their way to Atlanta, and they took my truck, and I have this nice Ram 2500 diesel cab truck, a mega cab. It's great. So she goes and she does her trip, and then she calls me later in the day. It's been raining. I figured traffic's horrendous. I was alone at the farm, and it was great because it was finally, after about 10 days, all of us being together, quiet time, and it was really nice to just relax. And so they were on their way back, and they got about an hour into the trip, and they stopped in Columbus to do a little shopping as the staff was getting ready to come up for our planning retreat, where we plan out the entire year of events that's going to happen in our church. So she stopped to check out a Target and get some things and supplies. They were going to pick up some food and then make their way back over. So she calls me just to give me an update. She goes, we're over here in Columbus, which is, again, about an hour from Atlanta. And she's filling me in on everything so that I know more or less when they're going to arrive. It's super dark in the country, and she didn't want me to be worried about her. And so she's keeping me informed. And she goes, but no worries. I already filled up the truck in Atlanta, and now we're just going to go ahead and pick up all the things, and then we're going to be home. And I just simply said to her, great. Hey, by the way, did you put regular gas or diesel in my truck? She goes, I put diesel. About 2 minutes after we hung up, all of a sudden I see her calling me back, and I said, no, she didn't. Sure enough, she says, now listen, Steve, I already Googled it. But, there was this real nervous sound in her voice. And she says, but I put gas in the truck instead of diesel. So I'm like, wow. And usually whenever she or the girls or Chris does something, I'm like, no problem, we can get this taken care of, we'll fix it. But I'm like, oh my gosh, this could be nasty. This is bad. And I had a little grace for her because when I first got the diesel, I was really worried about making that same mistake as well. And all the time I'd go in, I'm like, nah, put a little sticker somewhere, diesel, diesel, diesel. So I was able to work through that for the last year and a half or so. But she then says, now listen, I am sorry. I checked it out already. We should be okay. She says, so, but what happened was I pulled up to get diesel. And when I pulled up to get diesel, I saw this guy coming to me, and he made me nervous. So I'm like, there she goes. She knows how to get to me. She put gas in my diesel because she's protecting herself from a could-be thug. I got that. Okay. And so she says, and then what I did was instead of getting out of the truck at that point, I drove around because I saw some other people at an island of gas, and I drove over to that island because there's more people, and I totally forgot about the diesel thing. She goes, then I started pumping gas. I said, how much you get in there? She goes, it was about $15, $16, $17 because the guy started coming to me and started talking about how nice your truck was. I'm like, there she goes again. She just knows how to put it on, make me feel good about my truck so I don't feel bad about her putting gas in the diesel. She's a manipulator. She's good. She works the system, man. She goes, yeah, the guy really liked your truck, and he kept coming talking. So I figured I better just go ahead and get out of there. So I stopped pumping gas, and I left. I said, about $16, $17? She goes, yeah, and I'm calculating, okay, that's this many gallons. Tank holds this much diesel fuel. And so I thought about that for a little bit, and she hung up the phone after that, and Gabby texts me, says, Dad, Mom's like losing it over here. She's so nervous. She couldn't remember what we were supposed to get from Target for the staff. She just totally flipped out. She was so upset about making that mistake. And she says, Steve, I've seen you so many times drive around the gas place, just looking for diesel, leaving one place, go to another. I knew better, but I just got distracted. Now, here's what I knew at that point. I figured, okay, she had already been driving an hour from Atlanta to Columbus. So, most likely, we're going to be okay. Because the first thing they tell you not to do if you mix or put gas in a diesel tank is to turn on the truck. But that was already done, so we're way past that. The other thing they tell you to do is quickly pull over and drain the gas tank. We're past that. She's already headed for a good hour, a good 60 miles. And then I start to think to myself, well, maybe this thing is not that bad. Maybe she didn't put as much as she thought in there, which she did. I saw it on the credit card statement. Maybe it wasn't as bad. So what she did was, after she went shopping, she jumped in the car and she goes, I'm going to go by the gas station one more time, and I'm going to fill it up with diesel. I said, great idea. Because I'm figuring the drive that she took for about an hour, the truck jumping all over the road, maybe it went ahead and caused the stuff to kind of stir up. And if she puts more in there, maybe, just maybe, she can dilute the gas tank. And the gas that should have, with more diesel, it'll dilute what's there. And sure enough, somehow or other, that truck made it. No lights come on, engine trouble. We didn't lose a bit of power. That thing got her from Columbus back to the farm, because I was already checking around some of my buddies and the caretaker saying, I'm going to need your truck because I know this one's going to break down in Columbus, and then we'll figure out how to get it home. I was already trying to figure out the rental car. I'm like, okay, this has got to be done, but let's at least get them back. If we can get them back, then we can get everything taken care of. And you know what I did for real? When I hung up with her, first thing I did was say, God, I pay my tithes. I do. I pay my tithes. My 10% of my money goes to the Lord every week. I get a paycheck. My 10% goes in. Her 10%, ours, come on, it goes to the house of God. Why? Because part of the promise that the Word gives us is that God will rebuke the devourer for our sake. Now, that may sound corny to some of you, but let me tell you, you don't play with the natural gas and diesel. Because the first thing it tells you to do is sit that thing, shut it off, don't touch it. But it was too late. We were far past that thing. We were into, God, we need a miracle. And so I just had to remind God, God, I pay my tithes, which means you're going to rebuke the devourer for my sake. And that means my wife did not know better. Don't hold it against her, God. Give her grace. Give her mercy, Lord. Shower her with mercy. Her mind, she's limited in her capacity of automobiles and engines. And so give her revelation and understanding and grace. Because, God, that's my order of realm. That's my dominion. And I wasn't there to protect her. So, God, give her favor and keep my truck from breaking down, because, Lord, that will be mad. That could end this marriage. That's divorce territory, God. You know what ended up happening for real? God did a miracle. I really think he did. You know what he did, though? I think just by, in the natural, putting more diesel in that tank helped dilute the bad stuff that was in there. And over time, that bad stuff has burnt out. Now, that may sound like it's a stretch, but can I tell you, I think there's also in that, listen, some principles that can apply to our life. I see it's right here in the Word with a parable in Matthew chapter 13. Now, listen, I'm Pastor Steve today, but listen, I'm also Steve. And there are times in my life when I need God's good to come in and burn off some of the bad that is in me. Some of the bad that's taken place in my life. And we see it kind of laid out here in Matthew chapter 13, where a parable is being shared. And it's Jesus himself talking. And we find it in verse 24. And it says, Jesus told them another parable, and he said, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, he replied. The servants asked him, do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first, collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then, gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. I find this passage of Scripture so enlightening for me. Because for so long, I'm a very disciplined person. At least in my values and my morals, I like things done, played out a certain way. And then sometimes I just look around and I see that there's weeds. And I find it interesting because as much as we want to go and correct the wrong sometimes, as much as we want to go on and live this perfect life that we think is just needs to be this way, unbeknownst to us, there could also be weeds that are growing amongst our wheat. And some of us sowed towards it, but some of us didn't sow towards it. Because sometimes in life, stuff happens. And so there will be the mixture of, even in the perfect believer's life. What do I mean by perfect? I'm not saying sinless, but I'm talking about the person that puts it on their calendar every Sunday to be in the house of God. I'm talking about that person that, yes, pays their tithes. I'm talking about that person that is a believer and knows how to pray. Talking about that person that reads the Word, get into the Word. The one that we would all call the goody two-shoes, the perfect Christian. This shows me that even with the perfect Christian, sometimes there's some weeds that grow up in the field of their life. And the reason that is so is because there is an enemy. So let me just take you through a couple of truths that just stand out because I think it can relate to where we're at today. First off, it says in verse 24 that the kingdom of heaven, Jesus begins to preach about the kingdom of heaven. Now, he came preaching a new way, a different way that had been preached or taught in the past. And so he comes in talking about this kingdom of heaven. And he's trying to show us, I'm going to introduce to you something new, a new way, a more godly way, a way that had righteous principles and has heavenly values attached to it that were quite different than the norm of the day. I equate it to what our cell phones have done to us as we have been introduced to the kingdom of Apple. And life has forever changed. It's made how we do life different, from no longer needing an alarm clock. Who woke up to their cell phone today? No longer needing an alarm clock, to the way that we communicate with each other. It's changed the way we do life. And Jesus comes on the scene introducing us to a whole different way of living our lives. And in doing so, he exposes to us the real key to success. And that key, as he introduces to us the kingdom of heaven, is an internal drive of the heart, where no longer our lives would be motivated by this external laws, but instead an internal drive of the heart that takes, and here's the key, personal responsibility for our actions and our behavior, because not that the law is forcing us to do it, but because from our heart we love God so much that we desire to have a relationship with him. And just like anybody we love in the natural, we would not want to hurt or disappoint him. This is different. The kingdom of heaven is not something that's written in tablets of stone, but again, now it's the word of God written on the hearts of man, so that we're motivated by love to first serve him and serve others. That's the kingdom. You've got the kingdom of man and you've got the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is going to produce wheat in our life. And wheat is nutritious. It fills us. We use it for food. It helps us. It helps us stay healthy. It helps us grow. But then there is the kingdom of man, and the kingdom of man is producing weeds, tares, that has zero nutritional value at all to a person's life. Second of all, what comes to my mind as I read this is that there is an enemy who is sowing weed seeds. And that's why we need to be on alert. You see, sometimes we fall asleep at the wheel of our life. Sometimes we let our guard down, or sometimes just simply because of sin in the world. There is an enemy that's out there to sow the seed of weeds. And listen, the devil wouldn't be much of a devil if he didn't try and get a foot in the door and mess up our lives. He's a master at planting weed seeds. Yes, stuff happens. Life comes at us like a curveball sometimes, and we just don't see it all happening before our eyes. What's there today is changed for tomorrow. What we thought today doesn't seem to work for us. And what we watch in the media seems to make sometimes what we think and feel and base our life on look like it's old school and no longer applies to life. And if we're not careful and we let our standards down in our ethics and our values and our morals, which, by the way, ethics and values only are in place because of a group setting or a family setting. The only reason you need to walk in these principles is not so much just for you and God, it's for the people that you are connecting in your relationship with, because God will send people to bless you. Your biggest blessing in life, please hear me, your biggest blessing in life, sir, if you're married, is the woman that you're married to. The biggest blessing, ma'am, if you're married, is the man that you're married to. God sent them to you according to his word to complete you. And God made one man and he made one woman, and together they shall be one. And when he says, therefore you leave your mother and your father and you cleave to your wife or your husband, then the two shall be one. That's a blessing God has put in place for us to walk in. And if we let our guard down in that relationship, then there is a devil that's out there, an enemy that wants to sow weeds that cause discord in your relationship. And Peter warns us by saying, be alert and be sober-minded, because your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. And we're talking about people that would have been hearing from a very holy, righteous man. We're not talking about people in darkness that don't know God. He's putting this warning out there to you and I who know God. Thirdly, we see that the weeds and the wheat grow together. The King James Version of the Bible calls these weeds tares. T-A-R-E-S. And here's the challenge. It's hard to recognize the difference between the wheat and the tares when they're young in the field. Put a picture on the screen. It just kind of shows you what they both look like when they're young, immature in their growth. The wheat is to the left. The weed or the tares is to the right. It's hard to know the difference. It's hard to tell the difference. And that's the problem with sin. That's the problem with living standards that are more the kingdom of man instead of the kingdom of men. We can't abide by these standards of what Hollywood wants to force down our throats. We've got to be very sensitive to the people that we allow to speak into us, because the moment they speak into us, they're sowing seeds. And according to the word, if it's not based on the word and is not from a godly perspective, they are tares, they're weeds. And you may not know it at first. It looks the same. It doesn't look like it's going to harm you one bit. And that's the problem with missing the mark. Because the Bible even said that sin looks good for a season. What season? I can tell you most of the time, it's an immature season. It's a season when we don't really know better. It's a season when sometimes we haven't learned to take personal responsibility for our actions, and we don't contemplate how our actions to side-skirt the issue or to do it easier in life, to get what we want without abiding by the right kind of principles. We don't care when we're young and immature what our actions are going to have on other people. So we don't care at that young age that we could get pregnant before our time. We don't think through the whole process of how we one day may have to make a decision about the baby that's in our womb that we birthed without a husband. We don't have to think through those things when we're at an immature age in our immature thinking. And it may feel good for a moment because we can't tell the difference. So we get mad on the job. Our boss is giving it to us, asking us to do more work for him and be better at what we do. And we get mad. We don't like the way they talk to us. Because everybody in our society today, let's face it, it's not what they say, it's how they say it. So be careful you don't offend me. So he gets mad. He puts the pedal to the metal, puts the pressure on us. And listen, man, we give him a piece of our mind, and we don't care what happens. We just tell him, you're not going to disrespect me. Man, I'm out of here. And we walk out, and we think we feel real good because the man couldn't tell us how to live our life. And all of a sudden, we get in the car, and we drive home, and we realize, oh, no, I'm not going to get a paycheck next week. It always feels good for a season. But then the harvest of it comes. And here, as bad as that seems, it's like we see in the scripture, some of that stuff with the good and the bad, it all grows together. Wheat is the healthy harvest, whereas tares have no nutritional value at all. And even the master of the field knows that sometimes you can do everything right and still have some weeds in your field. Which then, number 4, it shows the owner's servants saw what was happening and they wanted to resolve the issue. Listen for a minute, please. You know, God puts pastors in your life for a reason. America's pastor can get up and say something to all of America that do not have a personal relationship with him, and you'll never be challenged by America's pastor. I'm talking about Joel Osteen. Great man. Love his message. Very motivating. But unless you're sitting in Houston, Texas, Joel Osteen's not your pastor. You can find good ministers all over this world, and you can watch them online. But unless you're sitting in their sanctuary and in their chapel or their churches, they're not your pastors. Because it's easy to love children that are not my own. Let me tell you, it's easy to do that. Every grandparent in this room knows it's great to be a grandparent, from what I hear, because they say that at the end of the day, even if they mess up and yell and scream and dirty their diapers, you don't have to do a thing about it. You take them, enjoy them for the day, then go and bring them home to the parents. If they're not your kids, it's easier to parent them. It's easier to say, oh, give them grace. Oh, it's okay. They weren't really being bad, but when they're your kid. And as a pastor, if you're in this church, you're my kid. Even though you may be older than me, you're still my kid. And as a result of that, I can't help but get worried when I see weeds. Because in this case, the owner's servants saw what was happening. And they didn't just want to grace it over. They were worried about the good wheat that would be affected by the weeds. So their question was, like a good pastor will do, how do I get in there and get rid of the weeds? Sometimes I come across harsh. Thank you. Nobody said amen. Sometimes I come across hard. That was a woman? She's got grace for it. Sometimes I come across kind, loving, caring. Should have been a lot more applause right there for that. What's the point? I just don't want to see weeds. And if I can see that you're sowing the seed that's going to produce weed, what kind of pastor would I be if I just let you go and sow all that stuff? What kind of pastor would I be? Jesus didn't do it. The apostles didn't do it. The prophets that did, there was a warning that was put out, and they were judged by God harshly because they did not speak truth. And we don't have to be popular today. The only popularity I want is the day that I stand before God and He says, I knew you, as opposed to, I never knew you. Is that wrong? So when the weeds are being sowed towards, it's our duty as a leader to step in and say, hey, that right there is not going to give you any nutritional value in your life. It's not going to set you up for the right kind of future. It's not going to help you build a foundation upon which you can build a beautiful life upon. Everything that God has blessed me with in my life today has been established upon a foundation that has come through the Word, which I knew that at times I had to go ahead and sow this Word over even the seed of my feelings, or even over the seed of certain popular ministries. Hey, if we hold our politicians and our police and our pastors accountable, then we need to hold ourselves accountable. And the same rule of measure that we have towards them, we better have towards ourselves. Or else we need a good, strong leader, a pastor, someone to come into our lives and say, hey, that's a seed that's going to produce a weed. Be careful with it. Now, I know strong leadership today is something this culture wants to shy away from. And even as a believer in Christ, we know, no, just let God speak to him. Listen, God has, I know how, just like you do, to silence the voice of God. Because God told me plenty of times not to do certain things, but I would not listen to God. It took my wife, it took my parents, it took some friends, it even took my kids to get my attention. And the point of that is sometimes you need a person to step into your world and say, stop it, that's wrong. Don't go down that path. It doesn't produce the right kind of results for you. Because God, you've already figured out a way to manipulate and turn off and silence, mute the very voice of God. So the servant had to get out there. But then under the grace of God, we see the fifth thing I pick up here is that the owner didn't want to pull up the weeds, or else it would hurt the harvest. The answer to that was, let them grow up together and then we'll deal with it at the harvest. Which tells me this: sometimes you and I just need to know what it is. This is going to hurt. Because we're ready, we want more declarations like Pastor Mary gave us today, which is actually giving us faith to be able to overcome some things that we're dealing with. But sometimes you just have to wait out a bad harvest. The farmer in the natural just can't go out there and say, okay, all this stuff here, I'm getting my breakthrough from this stuff right here. Even though it's bad and even though there's weeds here, I'm getting my breakthrough. No. If it's a bad harvest, the farmer knows next season it'll be better. I got to prepare for the next season. These football teams that are playing right now, coming down to the playoffs. Teams that didn't make it, no, I'm preparing for next season. They didn't quit after game 1 or game 2 or game 3 or game 4 or halfway through the season. Though they didn't have the fans in the stands, they didn't have the excitement, they didn't have a winning season, but instead they have a losing season. They couldn't quit mid-stride and throw up their hands and say, enough with this. No, they had to ride it out. And sometimes when you and I have a bad season because of bad seeds that have been sown and weeds that now we're walking into, we need to know what it is to just ride it out. Hang on. Things will change in the future. But right now it's going to get ugly. Right now it's going to get dirty. Right now it's going to get painful. I got to get back in the gym to get better and faster and stronger that next season, because this past season I didn't do too well. I got to study harder because the last year of class I didn't work that hard. I didn't discipline. I didn't spend enough time in the library. But I don't quit halfway through my school. I realize that I've got some grades that weren't the best and may have to take some over, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of ride out a bad season until a new season comes. And you can't pray away a bad season. You got to endure it. You can't curse it and manipulate it in the spiritual realm. You can't do that to a bad season. You just got to ride it out. So yes, you may be upset in your marriage. And he may not have treated you right, and you may want to leave, but I promise you, leaving is only sowing seeds of weeds that's going to hit you in your next season. If she's a good woman and a good man, but there's just been a few mistakes here and there, and you keep thinking the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, hold it, man. Just kind of look at the investment you've already made in that person and say to yourself, maybe I should sow better seeds. Let me go ahead and get counseling. Let me go ahead and humble myself. Let me go ahead and say, I'm sorry, even though I hate saying it and it doesn't mean anything, because I'm more of an action person. Instead of saying it, baby, I'll act it and show you. But no, he may need you to say it. Because the moment you cut and run on that, and I know all circumstances are different, but it's so hard to say things sometimes in this generation, in this day that we're living in. Because there's so many people's problems and issues that they're dealing with. And so many people that are ready just to prance on you if you don't say the right thing. So I don't mean any condemnation by this. But it's like a couple who just got married last night. Armando and Anna married them. Armando did a great job. The parents go to a Catholic church. The kids come to this church because the young man's parents come to this church and raised him here. And the mom later said to us, please, she watches us online, been to a couple of Humanity events. And she says to us, please keep my kids in your church. I'm okay that they don't go to the Catholic church with us, but just keep them in your church. Keep them close. Why? Because she knows without godly values being deposited into their life in Miami and South Florida, man, it's tough for a marriage to work, let alone the rest of the country, but especially here with all the temptation, with all the stuff that people are pushing over on you, and you're thinking that all that stuff is right, and it's easy to buy into that. And Armando said it while he's leading the wedding. He complimented them. He's saying, man, you did the right thing by getting married, because a lot of people just don't. And they just live together. And then after living together for a while, someone gets pregnant and they have a child. And then a child out of wedlock. Just watch Game of Thrones. You know how challenging a child out of wedlock is? Thank you. God. Excuse my belly. It's my Christmas. I'm trying to get rid of. It's weeds. Weeds. Every marriage is tough. All the married people. Is marriage easy? Would you do it again? Would you stay with them even when the times were as bad as they were? Would you have still stayed with them? It was worth it, wasn't it? It was worth a bad season that you had to just endure. It's okay. You can endure the bad season. And in your finances, if you're in debt, if you're that much in debt that you can't afford to tithes and give an offerings to the house of God, you need to go back and for real, you need to cut up those credit cards. And here's the new deal. You got to write it out. Pay the bill. Pay it all off. Get it done. Don't file for personal bankruptcy unless you're just needing some real help to get that done. But here's the principle, man. If I got into it, take responsibility, I'm going to get out of it. I got to figure out a way to do it. And I'm going to have to write out this bad harvest. I may not be able to go to the restaurant every night of the week anymore. I may not be able to go shopping for new shoes every other day. Now, I better stop spending. That's a miracle right there. There you go. Stop spending. Because if you can't afford to tithe, you'll never get ahead in your finances without saying, God, I bring you into the mix by giving you 10% and I trust you. And amazingly, what God does with the 90% is allow you to go further and have more with his blessing on the 90% than you keeping 100% all for yourself. But don't say that, Pastor Steve, because now all you're doing is talking about money. Somebody has to. I don't care how you feel about this president, but things are looking pretty good right about now in America. Our economy's not looking too bad, man. You may not like him, pray for him, because we want the stock market to keep climbing. People's investment portfolios are looking pretty good. And some of the older ones that got retirement deals, you're looking pretty good if you got your 401k set up in what is it? Stock market's doing good. Be praying for the guy. What's the point? Sometimes you just got to write out a bad harvest. Can't curse it away. Devil, I bind you out of that. You got kids that are acting a fool? Don't let them just do whatever they want to do. Get them in the house of God. Get them here on Wednesday night. Gabby's become our new youth director. Thankful for that. She's doing a wonderful job with her team. We're very happy for her. Get the kids here. Doesn't have to be the perfect place. You send them to school. How perfect is school? And some of you paying for college? It's not a perfect place in college. Some of you got professors that get paid to be there to teach, and they don't even show up and only put a note on the door. Sorry, class is canceled. But they should have told you that about 3 or 4 hours ago so you wouldn't have to woke up at the crack of noon or dawn. What's perfect? What's perfect? So your kid can't come to church because you don't have the time to get him here? Watch what seeds you sow. I know your son is the best baseball player that the county has ever heard of, because at 8 years old, he can swing a bat. That's how I see some parents get so excited that their 8-year-old kid is out there hitting a baseball that is it's so good, and they put them more in baseball than they do in the house of God, only to find out as they get older, it's a very, 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 very small percentage of young men out there making it to the minors, let alone the majors. And that's the seed that you've sowed into him his entire young adult life, and you wonder why he has no relationship with the local church. He doesn't want to come to church. And when he goes to college somewhere, he never goes to church, because the seeds that were sowed never put him in a position to like or love or appreciate or value or honor the local church or the pastor that's in their life. Guys, there's so much of this that I can keep you here till like next Sunday. We can go on and on with so many of these principles that are being diluted in the world, in the kingdom of men, and they're made to look like they're old-fashioned, and you shouldn't do it. And if you do, you're judgmental, and you're a bigot, and you're a racist. Here's the deal. You're just going to have to work through this bad harvest. And for those that are single, you're not going to find the right kind of people hanging out in areas of darkness. The club, it's not going to give you what you're looking for. Here's the deal about growing up myself in South Florida. I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. You know what I'm saying? I've seen them try, and it doesn't work. You're not going to find them in place of darkness. So here's what you do. It may be tough to be single. Write it out. It's a season. You can hang in there and ride this out. But then start looking around and say, maybe there's somebody on Monday nights that I need to be hanging out with. Maybe I need to come to the young adults. And as I come and listen to the word of God that God gives me, maybe, just maybe, I need to muster up the confidence to go over and ask one of the young ladies in this church to go out for coffee. Because we've got some very, very nice young men in this church and some very nice young women in this church. Now, let me just, for those of you that are single, let me help you. Let me help you. If you're 30 and above and you're single, stand up. Come on, let me just see who I'm praying for. Come on, 30 and single, stand up. And above. 30 and above and single. Come on. There you go. Come on. Anybody over here 30 and above and you're single? This is the section. That's where you need to start sitting if you're single. 30, because these people have figured it out. Maybe it'll rub off on you. Why do I bring this up? No, stay standing, really, standing. Last time I talked about this, I got in trouble from some of these singles that are standing right now because they said, Pastor Steve, you only talk to the young adults. What about us? They're right. There's some nice looking people in this church. We're praying for you. Hang out in the right places. Connect with the right environments. And it's tough. But never get discouraged. Just write out this season of your life. You may be seated because we're praying for you. Here's another group. Whoa. How about those who are 18 to 30 and you're single? Stand to your feet. Come on. Look at all these youngins. Wow. Are you going to tell me, young men, stay standing. No, don't sit down. Don't sit down. Are you going to tell me we can't make some things happen here? I mean, really, something can't just like all of a sudden, boom, there's magic, there's hearts and arrows and Cupid shows up. We can't make some of this happen here in the house of God. Something's got to happen. Because we got a couple of good-looking dudes in the back over here. One of them's really highly educated. He's got a good job. Great candidate right there. I'm telling you, man, got some educated people in this room. How many of you went to college? Let me see your hands. Look at this guy. Look at these right here. Look at these people. All of them college grads. What are we waiting for? Who are you waiting for? Muster up the courage. Muster up the confidence. Go connect with each other. Guy, find a girl. Girl, find a guy. You know what I'm talking about? Let's try to make some things happen. Get to know each other. They're not perfect. Of course they're not. And neither are you. But just give it a shot. Here's what you can't do. You can't go find some kind of love on the computer. Well, I'm not talking about dating sites, okay? Maybe that works for you if it's a Christian dating site. I highly promote that. That could work for some of you. But don't go looking for love in all the wrong places just to satisfy something in here. Bad seed, it's going to hurt you later. It's going to hurt you later, gentlemen. And ladies, it'll hurt you later. Don't hang out in the club. You're not going to find it at the club. As cool as it is and as wonderful as it is. You're just not going to find it. It's hard for young men. You're going to be put in an environment where your flesh will definitely lead you. And you're not going to feel good in the next day or week or month. We're praying for you. You may be seated. But here's the deal. Hang in there for this tough season. Because the way to get rid of the weeds It shows us here is in the furnace. We can't pray away the weeds enough. We got to believe that they're burnt up and it's over. The past is yesterday. And that's the part of our service that we want to move into right now. Because whatever weeds have come up in the garden of your life, the weed killer is this right here. The answer is not trying to go find another field. The answer is, I've got a field in my life right here. I'm going to go ahead, start fresh with. There's a new beginning for me. I'm going to move in the right direction by sowing good seed. Not bad seed, good seed. But first, I'm going to deal with my weeds. They can't be destroyed on there, just sitting there. We need to do something about it. They have to disappear. Let's get rid of them. And we can do that by focusing on good seed, burning up the old weed, and looking at the grace of God that's available for us today. And that's why we want to start this year on fire. So how about it? Let's burn some stuff this morning. You ready for that?